Evil men have already divided up the world into regions, and they've got it all planned. They want to rule the world. Their goal is to reduce the population to 500 million, with a few of them as the elite get to rule the world. God has plans for the world, and so does Satan. And Satan's plan is no people here, maybe just a few, and a one-world government. The Bible says perilous times shall come. The people will be fierce, despisers of those that are good. Christians are going to be absolutely hated.
Will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't just a crisis.
We know the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm?
I do have one question. During the crisis or any time that you're aware of, has the Federal Reserve or Treasury participated in any gold swaps arrangements?
We don't. The Federal Reserve does not own any gold at all. We have not owned gold since 1934.
You fired me once again! Not with these planes, which hither ye have brought from regions where I reign.
Which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay, that eating shellfish is an abomination? Or we could go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith? Or should we just stick to the Sermon on the Mount, a passage that is so radical that it's doubtful that our own Defense Department would survive its application?
Readings have told me, for what it's worth, that some of us will be able to have ascended abilities. I mean, full-on ascended abilities prior to the actual shift happening. So that would be very cool, because what we're expecting after 2012 is a 100 times more harmonious utopian world where things like time travel, levitation, instant telepathy, instant healing, telekinesis are as common and as everyday as breathing.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
If the Bible is simply a book of myths, fairy tales, and stories, then it is disturbingly accurate in describing what we see unfolding in our current world climate. In my personal journey, I've come to the conclusion that the biblical worldview best explains the origin of evil and its many symptoms to mankind. It explains human suffering and the inescapable reality of death and decay that we experience in this world. But most importantly, it reveals why mankind has used deception as its most powerful and reliable instrument to carry out the plan set in motion by an ancient hate. To understand the biblical worldview of the New World Order, we must first look at the fall of mankind as recorded in Genesis 3. This chapter reveals the origin of the plan, who's behind it, and where it's going. No other ancient text reveals so much about the nature of evil and its methods than the Bible, and this is where it all begins. We all know the story. Adam and Eve were created by God in the Garden of Eden. God's creation was good, and mankind was very good. God had one commandment for Adam and Eve to follow. A serpent came and tempted Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This is where it all begins. Prior to this point, mankind was not susceptible to death, but Satan had other plans. The first lie ever recorded in human history comes from the mouth of Satan himself. Satan, being the father of lies, was able to redefine what good meant. Upholding to the traits of a great deception, Satan's lie contained some truth. But to understand how this lie has permeated throughout history and is being used to create the New World Order, we must break down this passage. Satan knew that when they ate of the fruit of this tree, that mankind would be subject to death. This lie is the foundation for New Age ideas like reincarnation. It is the idea that even though we may physically die, there is no heaven or hell, but instead we return with another opportunity to attain enlightenment. It is also the one lie that many of the world elite believe today, which is that through the use of intellect, technology, and science, man will achieve immortality. This will become more obvious as we look into the sacred promise or ancient hope held close to those who are at work for the New World Order. Satan was implying here that secret knowledge and wisdom will be available to them. This is the main proponent behind the nature of secrecy which all secret societies possess. It is the idea that unattainable information will be partitioned to those who submit to the request of the one who holds the knowledge. It also plays on the hope promoted by the New Age movement, which claims that we are all spiritually evolving into a higher consciousness, and that if one would only tap into this universal energy force, they would realize that they are God. The New World Order and its components, secret societies, New Age movement, transhumanist movement, and even the alien agenda in many ways is predicated on this one lie. The idea that man would become God is the elusive carrot on a stick that has been behind many, if not all, of man's attempts to acquire power, authority, and dominion over the masses while conquering death and nature in the process. Furthermore, we can trace ideas like pantheism and the concept that God is a force, or that everything within the universe is God and thus we are God, back to this lie. It is the ultimate deception because it plays on human pride. It is the driving force behind ideas such as morality is relative and karma. It is the denial of evil and accountability to sin. This is the core of the Luciferian doctrine. It is the blueprint to what the select group of men have been working on for centuries. Exclusive knowledge to achieve immortality and become gods, all without the help of the Creator God, but by our own use of intellect. As we will come to see, this idea, which goes by many names like the Sacred Promise and an Ancient Hope, has been sought after by men for centuries.
Here's the way they look at it. Here's their metaphor for the end of innocence. Adam and Eve were held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, cruel, and vindictive God. Until Lucifer, through his agent Satan, set man free from this garden by giving him the gift of intellect. Through the use of intellect, man will conquer the earth, will conquer nature, and will himself become God. It's taught in every Masonic temple in this land. Every secret brotherhood, every secret society, every mystical temple Every occult organization teaches the Luciferian philosophy.
Satan, the enemy of God, is in reality the highest divine spirit. Hey guys, Steve here. In this video we're going to be looking at how the entire New Age movement is actually satanic and Luciferian at its roots. And before we take a look at some research, I just want to make a few things really clear. I'm not saying everyone involved in the New Age movement is satanic, and I'm not saying every single topic or every single pursuit within the New Age movement is satanic. But what we'll be looking at is how the side of the New Age movement that has to deal with spirituality and has to do with the occult is entirely rooted in satanic philosophy. And this comes from, not me, but the founder of the Church of Satan himself. And the point of this video is not to fearmonger or to preach Jesus to you or something. Christianity could be false and it wouldn't even affect the point of this video. The point of this video is really just to encourage those who might be dabbling within the New Age movement to follow the evidence where it leads and to turn away from things which might be dangerous or harmful. So with that being said, let's take a look at some stuff. So to start off, one of the most famous occultists in history is someone named Anton LaVey. He has been called the Black Pope and the father of Satanism because he is the one who founded the Church of Satan and brought it to the Western world as an organized religion. He is the author of the Satanic Bible, along with 4 other satanic books, and he has an extensive background in the occult. In fact, he was the founder of the Order of the Trapezoid, where he used to give presentations on the occult and paranormal research, which later evolved into the Church of Satan. So the Church of Satan was birthed out of his interest and affiliation with the occult. When I first became Christian, I was a little over-ambitious, and I went out and bought the Satanic Bible, which I've since thrown out, to speed read it to see if I could find any parallels between the New Age movement and the Satanic Bible. And when I was reading through it, I was finding topics like the Age of Aquarius, Lucifer as the personification of enlightenment, Thoth, spirit guides, pantheism, spiritual rebirth through studying the mysteries, the all-seeing eye, being your own redeemer and savior through enlightenment. It sounded like a slightly darker version of the exact same topics that were discussed in the New Age. So I dug a little deeper and I found this quote by Anton LaVey. In the scores of books lining the shelves of New Age bookstores, there are instructions for guided meditation, creative visualizations, out-of-body experiences, getting in touch with your spirit guides, fortune-telling by cards, crystal balls, or the stars. What if Satanists reclaimed these for their own dark purposes and integrated them into rituals dedicated to the devil, where they rightfully belong? New Agers have freely drawn upon all manner of satanic material, adapting it to their own hypocritical purposes. But in truth, all New Age labeling is, again, trying to play the devil's game without using his infernal name. So some people hearing that might be offended, they might feel a little off-put by that, but this isn't coming from me, this is coming from the father of Satanism, who spent his entire life studying the occult. So I think a good question to ask might be, is it possible that he knows something that we don't know yet? As it turns out, the entire New Age movement has its roots in satanic philosophy, and it was actually popularized and basically founded by a Satanist, and we're going to take a look at that right now. Some of you might be familiar with a woman named Helena Blavatsky. She is an occultist and a spiritualist from the 19th century who has been called the mother of the New Age and the mother of modern spirituality because of how far-reaching her impact has been on the New Age movement. She co-founded the Theosophical Society, which taught and published esoteric material pertaining to theosophy. Theosophy, according to Wikipedia, refers to systems of esoteric philosophy concerning or seeking direct knowledge of presumed mysteries of being and nature, particularly concerning the nature of divinity. Theosophy is considered a part of a broader field of esotericism, referring to hidden knowledge or wisdom that offers the individual enlightenment and salvation. The society taught everything you could possibly imagine that could fall under the umbrella of the New Age, and really gave rise to the entire New Age movement. As New Religious Movements research specialist from the University of California, Dr. J. Gordon Melton said, "No single organization or movement has contributed so many components to the New Age movement as the Theosophical Society. It has been the major force in the dissemination of occult literature in the West in the 20th century." He has also said, "Madame Blavatsky stands out as the fountainhead of modern occult thought, and was either the originator and or popularizer of many of the ideas and terms which have a century later been assembled within the New Age movement." The Theosophical Society, which she co-founded, has been a major advocate of occult philosophy in the West and the single most important avenue of Eastern teaching to the West. So she was the major player in the popularization of New Age subjects. She would teach on things like ascended masters, ancient mythology, Hermeticism, Hinduism, mysticism, scientism, astrology, sacred math, esoteric knowledge, chakras, Atlantis, Kabbalah, and every other New Age topic. Between 1887 and 1997, over 2,800 journals were published in the theosophical magazine she started, called Lucifer. Yes, that's right. The mother of modern spirituality published her journals in her magazine, Lucifer. Now some of you might be like, wait a minute, Lucifer's not Satan. Lucifer is a symbol for enlightenment. He's the light bearer. I'll make another video in the future showing how, in scriptural terms, Lucifer actually is Satan. Lucifer became Satan after he fell. But we don't even have to go there because Helena Blavatsky herself calls Lucifer Satan. In fact, in Volume 2 of her primary work, The Secret Doctrine, she glorifies and praises Satan well over 100 times, calling him the one true God and the savior of humanity. So right now I'm going to read through some quotes that are in Volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine, and I'll include a link to the entire book in the description of this video, so you can go and read these yourself. Satan is the anointed cherub of old. God created Satan, the fairest and wisest of all his creatures in this part of his universe, and made him prince of the world and of the power of the air. Thus, Satan, being perfect in wisdom and beauty, his vast empire is our earth, if not the whole solar system. Certainly, no other angelic power of greater or even equal dignity has been revealed to us. It is Satan who is the god of our planet, and the only god. In this case, it is but natural, even from the dead letter standpoint, to view Satan, the serpent of Genesis, as the real creator and benefactor, the father of spiritual mankind. For it is he who is the harbinger of light, bright, radiant Lucifer, who opened the eyes of the automation created by Jehovah, as alleged, and he who was the first to whisper, "In the day ye eat thereof ye shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil," can only be regarded in light of a savior. Satan, the enemy of God, is in reality the highest divine spirit. Lucifer is divine and terrestrial light, the Holy Ghost, and Satan at one and the same time. So here is the mother of the New Age, who has had the largest influence on this movement, praising Satan as the spiritual father of mankind and the one true God of this universe. Is it possible that he's the spiritual father of the New Age movement and the type of esoteric material that was taught by Blavatsky? Let's take a look at another major influencer on the New Age movement and popularizer of the occult, who some of you are probably already familiar with. His name is Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was a famous occultist and a 33rd degree Freemason from the early 1900s. He was a bona fide expert in the occult and has had a major influence on making esoteric material accessible to the West. He has also had a massive influence on Gerald Gardner, who is credited with bringing Wicca and witchcraft to the mainstream. In fact, the Wiccan rules and other witchcraft initiation rituals were taken almost word for word by Gerald from Crowley's material. He has also had influence on Timothy Leary, who claimed he was carrying out Crowley's work.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said he was in favor of finding your own self and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, under love. It was a very powerful statement. I'm sorry he isn't around now to appreciate the glories that he started.
And even had influence on Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. The AA, or Argenteum Astrum, is a spiritual organization he founded in 1907. Students would enter the order and then master certain occultic tasks and learn and study esoteric knowledge in order to graduate to the next level. If you were to be initiated into the order of AA, here are some of the things that you would learn about: astral projection, Hinduism, Kabbalah, yoga, magic, non-duality, ascended masters, the tree of life, transcendental meditation, higher selves, Buddhism, mysticism, Gnosticism, sorcery, rituals of the pentagram and hexagram, tarot cards, the zodiac, and many, many other topics that get taught under the umbrella of the New Age movement. There was a reason he was called by some to be a modern master of the occult, and it's because he knew what he was talking about. But like Blavatsky, he also had ties to Satanism. He referred to himself as the Beast 666, and once said, "I was not content to believe in a personal devil and serve him in the ordinary sense of the word. I wanted to get hold of him personally and become his chief of staff." He has also said, "For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. For nearly all purposes, human sacrifice is the best." He has also said, "It is, however, always easy to call up the demons, for they are always calling you, and you only have to step down to their level and fraternize them. They will then tear you in pieces at their leisure. Nevertheless, every magician must firmly extend his empire to the depth of hell." He has also said, "This serpent, Satan, is not the enemy of man, but he who made gods of our race, knowing good and evil. He bade, know thyself, and taught initiation. He is the devil of the Book of Thoth, and his emblem is Baphomet, the androgyne who is the hieroglyph of arcane perfection. So here's another major player in the New Age movement, calling Satan the god of our race. After being involved in the occult for over half a century and dedicating his entire life to magic, the spiritual mysteries, and the occult, he left this world a broke drug addict with the final words, "I am perplexed. Satan, get out." Others say his last words were, "I am perplexed," along with, "Sometimes I hate myself." With all due respect, do we really think that he was just a few more spiritual mysteries or a few more occult topics away from leaving this world in peace? Maybe if he hadn't left the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn so soon? Or if he would have studied Gnosticism a little more diligently? He's the most famous occultist who ever lived, had a massive influence on the New Age movement, and left this world totally confused, hating himself, and may or may not have had Satan breathing over his shoulder. So why are the three most famous occultists of all time all mesmerized with Satan? Is this just a coincidence, or is it possible that Satanism and the occult actually go hand in hand? What if Helena Blavatsky was right, and what if Anton LaVey was right when he said that New Age ideas and themes really belong attached to satanic and Luciferian philosophy? To take a dive a little bit deeper, there's a website called Joy of Satan Ministries. It's a website dedicated to spiritual Satanism, and on their website you can learn about the following topics in depth: astrology, auras, magic, self-hypnosis, incense, pendulums, runes, telekinesis, brainwaves, clairvoyance, past lives, chanting, the pineal gland, the chakras, bioelectric technology, the astral plane, spells, the kundalini serpent, and trance. And you can learn all of this stuff from their Satanic Witchcraft Index, their information about the human mind, and their index of satanic meditations. Why would the Joy of Satan Ministries teach these things unless they were consistent with spiritual Satanism? The ideas and themes of the New Age are the exact same ideas taught in spiritual Satanism, and that should be concerning to some of us. And these are the same ideas that were taught by Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, advocated along a satanic philosophy, and are the very ideas that Anton LaVey accused the New Age of stealing from the devil. Now, somebody might say, okay, maybe some famous occultists from the past had some ties to Luciferian philosophy or something, but we don't see that going on today anymore. The New Age has completely disconnected from any kind of ties to Luciferian or satanic philosophy, and they have nothing in common anymore. Well, take a look at this.
Mars looked very much like Earth a little less than 1 million years ago. It was beautiful. It had oceans and water and trees that were just fantastic. But something happened to them, and it has to do with something called the Lucifer experiment. From the very beginning of creation, everything is simply an experiment. Creation itself was just consciousness creating and inhabiting itself in that creation. There is no divine plan. Spirit can do whatever it wants. Having said that, if Spirit decides to cut itself off from the rest of consciousness and create a separate reality on its own, it can do that too. This is called the Lucifer experiment. Because Spirit is God, it can do this. There is nothing wrong with that. We've kind of been led to believe that Lucifer is evil and the devil. This just isn't true. Lucifer is just another means of perceiving the reality. It is not a unity perception of oneness, but rather a duality perception of two-ness. There's a flower of life pattern for Lucifer as well, but that's a big topic for another time.
So here is Spirit Science, the largest New Age website in the world, the largest New Age YouTube channel in the world, a website I used to write for, showing signs of Luciferian philosophy that Helena Blavatsky advocated. And there's an article on the Spirit Science website that talks about this a little bit more. The Lucifer experiment, if you recall from the Human History movie, was about a particular consciousness connected to the all who didn't want to play the same boring song. He wanted to be his own rock star, and so he split himself off from God consciousness and did his own thing, creating chaos and destruction in his wake. Now, the reason this is showing up in the work of Spirit Science is because most of Jordan's material is based off of the material of Drunvalo Melchizedek, who wrote The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volumes 1 and 2. Most of which the Spirit Science series is based off of. So the largest New Age website and the largest New Age YouTube channel in the world right now is based off of material that, as we're about to see, praises Lucifer in the exact same way Helena Blavatsky did. And I'm going to read some quotes right now from The Flower of Life, Volume 2, and I'll include a link to that book in the description too, so you can double check. Lucifer did not create free will, but it was through his actions and decisions that free will became a reality. It was God who created Lucifer so that free will would exist. I am in no way attempting to protect Lucifer or sanction his acts. I'm simply giving a new/old perspective on what is behind what Lucifer is doing in the universe, that, once understood, allows the possibility of transcending good and evil and entering into pure oneness with God. So this is basically saying that if you understand Lucifer's role in the universe, you can transcend the duality of good and evil, transcend the duality of righteousness and sin, and you can skip past Jesus and enter into a holy union with God if only you understand Lucifer's role in the universe. So evidently, with God's blessing, since he created him, Lucifer started on a great experiment to see what could be learned by creating in a different way from how God/Spirit had made the original creation. So Lucifer, according to this book, is also a creator god, just like Helena Blavatsky said. Lucifer told the angelic realms that we needed to do this experiment because the universe had missing information, and the only way to get the information was to live it. So yeah, the entire fall of angels that the Bible talks about, that's because God created a universe with missing information. And Lucifer and his angels apparently had to fall because there was, quote, missing information that had to be experienced. So this Luciferian philosophy is right at the heart of the New Age movement and was at the heart of the New Age movement from the very beginning. So we have looked at how the father of the Church of Satan accused the New Age of stealing from Satan. We have seen the most influential man and woman on the New Age movement praise Satan and teach esoteric philosophy alongside Luciferian doctrine. We have seen how spiritual Satanists use New Age practices and ideas in their own devotions to Satan, and we have seen how Lucifer has even made his way into the Spirit Science series. And this, of course, begs the question, and this is the whole point of the video right here. Is it possible that the material taught alongside Luciferian philosophy is part of the same deception? Is it not likely that any material that advocates Lucifer or Satan in a positive light would be filled with lies and deception? So I think this should really make us ask the question, is it possible that Anton LaVey was right? Is it possible that all of these lifetime occultists who started the entire New Age movement know something that we don't? Is it possible that maybe New Agers, like I used to be, were simply cherry-picking from Luciferian doctrine and just leaving his name out? Well, stick around because we're going to look at each individual topic in the New Age on an in-depth basis to show that this is exactly what's happening. Because any subject or idea that gets consistently taught along a satanic or Luciferian philosophy should be questioned and should even be doubted. And so this is not about me trying to guilt-trip people or fear-monger or anything like this. It's just to present the possibility that maybe some people have followed a trail of breadcrumbs down the wrong path. And I'm not trying to condemn anybody or anything like this, I just want to encourage people into the direction of truth and away from stuff that's harmful or dangerous. Paul once said that Satan masquerades himself as an angel of light, and maybe it's the case that this is exactly what we're seeing within the New Age movement.
Also during this period of the 1950s, an entity named Ashtar, who claims to be from outer space, began deliberately contacting certain individuals by means of channeling, telepathy, trance mediums, and even Ouija boards. And this entity named Ashtar was offering salvation and an assortment of other amazing things to humankind in the 1950s. Now, Ashtar claims to be orbiting the Earth in a huge spaceship. He ranks himself Commander-in-Chief of the Free Federation of Planets. Sounds like something out of a Star Trek movie. Ashtar has recently written a book channeled through a New York businessman titled The New World Order that focuses on astounding predictions regarding the future of humanity. Now let's look at some Old Testament Bible verses. Judges in particular will start. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Now down here in Judges again. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, the gods of Zidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the children of Ammon, the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord and served not him. Ashtaroth, and you can see here there were a lot of other gods here, and also in Samuel. Put away the strange gods and Ashtaroth from among you. And the children of Israel did put away Balaam and Ashtaroth and served the Lord only. Now, the similarity in the spelling of these two names, Ashtar and Ashtaroth, in my opinion, is not a coincidence. I believe we're dealing with the same entity. So now we have this Ashtar, or Ashtaroth, an Old Testament false deity who is linked to today's UFO phenomenon. Now, we saw in Matthew 24, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Well, in the 1950s, certain contactees claimed that they were in contact with some of these extraterrestrials, so-called extraterrestrials. And in 1952, a contactee named George Van Tassel, who died in 1978, claimed that he received telepathic messages from more than 20 of these so-called extraterrestrials, including Ashtar, in the Mojave Desert in California. Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Subsequently, telepathic contact with the Ashtar Command occurred regularly in the years to follow. Now, the Ashtar Command boasts many great fleets of spaceships occupied by thousands of well-organized ranks of extraterrestrials. And one of its missions includes the evacuation of selected human souls during cataclysmic events that are soon to occur on Earth. Sounds like a rapture scenario. Now, the Ashtar Command has associates. 4 in particular, and 2 of the associates, or some of the extraterrestrials that are supposedly ranked higher, are Soltec and Munka. And these pictures are circulating the internet or New Age bookstores. 2 other associates involved with the Ashtar Command, or Ashtaroth, are Courtney and Athena. Now that's an interesting name. Athena has been recognized as the ancient Greek goddess, the gods of the Old Testament. Now, Athena claims to be a commander of the starship of Sananda. Okay, well, who is Sananda? Sananda claims to be one of the highest ranked extraterrestrials and is often referred to as the beloved commander-in-chief of the Ashtar Command. However, Sananda's main claim to fame is that he claims to be the historical Jesus Christ. He's also recognized as the Master Jesus. And we're going to see how these masters fit into this UFO scenario. But as you can see, they've taken an historical picture of Jesus Christ that has probably been in thousands of churches throughout the world, and they've attached this name Sananda. So they believe that the historical Jesus Christ is an extraterrestrial. Now, at this present time, and at an alarming rate, Sananda, Ashtar, Ashtaroth, members of the Ashtar Command, and legions of other so-called extraterrestrials are channeling messages regularly through thousands of light workers and other human individuals or groups of individuals who today are devoted to New Age ideologies and UFO organizations. Now, I mentioned the word light workers. If you go to any New Age bookstore or read any New Age book, you'll see this term often. Light workers are New Age disciples devoted to the undertaking of this spiritual assignment on earth known as the divine plan, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. This divine plan is a spiritual reorganization of the planet.
You know, you've used that word several times today, and I was raised as a Christian in my coming up to understand religion and so forth. And I actually believe one of the predictions in the Bible, in Revelations, talking about after the Armageddon, that Christ will return for 1,000 years of reign, peaceful reign on earth. But I don't think it's one person. I think it's all of us. Yeah. I think it's all of us.
Now, the Jesus story, Jesus truly, folks, this may be a button pusher for you, but Jesus never existed.
Our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
These objects have been tracked since the early 1950s, if not earlier, traveling up to 7,000 miles per hour, making right-angle turns at high rates of speed.
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin.
Our commanders and all told us, just keep your mouth shut about it. We can't say it did it or it didn't. So for 64 years, I've been trying to explain what we saw. And you're the first guys that really want to know what I saw.
Well, I have interviewed hundreds of people who claim to have had amazing sightings, including those who claim to have been abducted.
If we go back to, say, the Middle Ages in England, we get reports of fairies, of goblins, of little creatures, and they parallel eerily today's abduction experiences with the so-called Greys. I think we're dealing with beings that are creating a meme to sow the seeds of belief in extraterrestrials when in reality there's something extremely different.
For me, the experiences really started with what I would call manifestations.
You can't do anything. They're in total control.
I became paralyzed, and the entity, or whatever it was that was doing this to me, was laughing at me, and I was so afraid. I didn't know what to do. I can't remember whether I said, Jesus, 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 or Jesus help me, but at that instant, my experience stopped, and I hit the bed, which woke my wife up, and she asked me what I was doing jumping on the bed.
If these actually are extraterrestrial entities flying millions of light years across space, why would they be afraid of the name of Jesus and run from you when you bring him up?
I think you'll find the truth, it's a lot stranger than most people realize.
One of the main topics of interest the New Age movement has harnessed through the infiltrating of the Truth movement has been on the topic of UFOs and ETs. Many of these folks, like David Wilcock, David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, and many others, have in fact verified the concept that the UFO phenomenon is not necessarily flesh and blood beings, but are a race of highly evolved spiritual entities who have attained what we refer to as godhood and power over the elements of nature and physics of which we are currently limited to.
I think the New Age, as well as the mainstream sort of media, and I mean like movies and television shows, and everybody's been shoving this alien UFO thing down our throats because it has so many uses for the Antichrist system. I've said many times, I don't know if this is the way that it will all be set up. It is just a really convenient way if it does go down like this, because it does do three main things that are needed for the Antichrist system. Number one, it causes the world to reject God. We've been sold this erroneous idea that if aliens exist, then God doesn't. So the headlines the day after would read, you know, God proven wrong or whatever. The whole world would be united in its rejection of God overnight. So that certainly would play in, obviously, to the biblical account of this world order at the end of time. Also, we would believe ourselves to be God. This one would take a little bit longer to sink in, but the idea that aliens, in a real sort of evolution kind of way, just evolved, and that it could be sold to us that they were somehow our creators in the sense that they genetically modified us, or they might have some excuse to the origin of life or something to that effect. Ultimately, we would see them as gods in the sense of their perhaps abilities or their technological advancement, and it really depends on this point of how and what they say about us, if they say anything, or if in the discovering of them that it is implied in some way that we ourselves could be like them and therefore like gods. And that really goes into the third part, which is the evolution. I think that this concept of evolution is crucial to so much of what the Antichrist system does, especially the genocide based on belief system that happens in the end time scenario, really requires, as it did in the Third Reich, an idea of evolution. There's a concept that there's certain people that are not fit for the new system, the new evolution. They were sort of helping humanity evolve by the elimination of those that weren't ready for the new age, the new world. Hitler believed in the fifth root race of Blavatsky, but yet I think this new system is going to have a very unique version of evolution. And of course, the appearance of aliens really validates that on a worldwide scale. No longer do you have to, have this sort of underground preaching of theosophy as it was in Hitler's time, but rather the whole world is united in this understanding, or perceived understanding, of potential evolution coming. After all, the aliens are here. We can be like them. They just simply evolved like we have the potential to do. We can become like them. We can communicate telepathically or whatever, as long as we are willing to take that next step. And there's this great precipice that we're now at this ability to move to this next level, but it's all going to be in the context of God has just recently been disproven, but yet there will be people on earth that can't quite go with the new system because they're stuck in the old paradigm of God does exist and the Bible was accurate and these aliens are a deception. Those people will be presented as enemy number one and will be viewed as the thing that's holding us back from the potential evolution.
And opinions which permeate through society now in regards to Christianity are a residue to what we see in the esoteric writings. Even if the majority of the people who hate fundamental Christianity and religion in general are not aware of the specific assaults made by the theosophical authors, the basic attitude towards Jesus, his message, and to all Christians who believe and follow him are consistent.
The system is being built around us, the control grid, the economy, everything is being built to force everyone to worship the Antichrist. That is what this is all about. That's what makes everything make sense. It's the one component that makes everything make sense. And so what is behind it is a spiritual agenda, as it says in Ephesians 6:12, but it's also something that experientially that you can see in the research of the New World Order. that they are attending rituals, they are receiving instruction from those rituals, and that instruction is to do the nuts and bolts things, to create the system, to do this, to do the poisoning or whatever, all the different conspiracies that are a part of that have some sort of mechanism or use in this future world government, world religion, world economy, which has one purpose, isn't to extract the worship of humanity for an ancient cherub.
If and when this chaos breaks out, the world will be crying out for help. They will be asking for someone or something to come save the day. We have been programmed for decades by mainstream media and our politicians and world leaders to trust our governments in times of crisis and confusion. My theory is that this is when the world government will be solidified. It will be a necessary action that everyone will accept in order to rebuild society and a chance to do it right in the minds of many. A one-world economy and a one-world government are certainly possible and within reach right now. But the one thing that will cause the world to worship one man is a one-world religion. This will require something phenomenal and something beyond our scope of reality.
I think that the UFO alien thing is going to be the way that the one world religion described in the Bible comes about, or at least play a role in it. I would admit that there are probably other scenarios in which this one world religion could come about, but none of the ones that are promoted out there now in the mainstream do I see as plausible in any way. For instance, there is sort of a dueling version of, I think one group is going to say it's the Muslims that's going to create this one world Muslim religion, and another group says it's going to be the Catholics, a one world Catholic religion. Both of those are problematic because the religion described in the Bible is one that people willingly embrace, not are forced to convert to. And I see that as both of those as very problematic because we've been trained to hate both of those for various reasons. Obviously, Catholicism has many problems and is deserving of the criticism that it gets, but I think the reason that it is used like that is because people don't distinguish between Catholicism and true biblical Christianity. So by pointing at the Catholic Church, Satan gets to discredit Christianity in the minds of many people, although most of us would say that what the Catholic Church is doing and does is in no way biblical, but most people don't distinguish Christianity from the Crusades, and so that's a very advantageous thing that Satan uses. To say that the world is going to be taken over by Catholicism has already the problem of trying to get the people that have been trained all their life to hate Catholicism to now embrace it.
These so-called alien entities, whatever they are, had made denials about Christianity when they were speaking to, various abductees, contactees, whoever. And what Ray found was that in a number of cases it was always Christianity that was targeted rather than any other religions. It was always that one that was being criticized, and Ray kind of perceived it as being as he saw it, sort of the two true forces, good and evil, the Christian belief system and, the minions of Satan squaring up against each other. And he felt that the denial of Christianity by these entities was evidence that they're probably not extraterrestrial because they were focusing on just one religion.
Bailey also goes on to say how there must be a chaos before the unification of government and religion, and the subsequent appearance of the quote-unquote Christ, stating, quote, "They come in times of crisis. They frequently create crisis in order to bring to an end the old and the undesirable and make way for new and more suitable forms for the evolving life of God immanent in nature. They come when evil is rampant. For this reason, if for no other, an avatar may be looked for today. The necessary stage is set for the reappearance of the Christ." And
we're going to continue, and we're going to talk about the Vatican's secret plans for welcoming an alien God with a small g under the reign of the last pope.
He says without apology that very soon the nations of the world are going to look to the aliens for their salvation. I think it's headed towards an imminent great deception. I think they either know something or they suspect something, and that's why they're preparing the Catholic faithful. And of course, the Vatican has reached beyond Catholics. But they're trying to prepare the world.
In fact, why is Hollywood glamorizing all these things at the same time?
Well, that's exactly right. So is that part of the setup? Are there occultists in Hollywood that have an agenda to try to help prepare humanity for what could be a kind of great deception?
I'll tell you what, as the kids say, you're blowing my mind, but you've got to make Jesus your Lord. Believe he forgave you of your sins. Believe he's your Lord. Welcome him inside now.
The purpose of the flood was not just that there was sin in the land. There was, that's emphasized. But if sin brings the flood, we better get some life jackets. No, there's something far deeper going on. That's what I want to sensitize you for when you do your own study and come to your own conclusions. But I want you to recognize there's something much more profound that God, it's a problem that God was solving, and that is that Satan's strategy was to contaminate the human race.
Scholars with no religious affiliation who have looked into this topic of UFOs and ETs for several decades have come to very interesting conclusions. Jack Vallée, a venture capitalist, computer scientist, author, ufologist, and former astronomer who helped build the precursor to what we know as the Internet, has studied the UFO phenomenon for over 3 decades. After looking into the relationship between UFOs, cults, religious movements, demons, angels, ghosts, and psychic phenomenon, Vallée changed his proposed hypothesis from the UFO phenomenon being an extraterrestrial origin, in other words, craft and beings from another planet or a faraway galaxy, to a multi-dimensional visitation hypothesis, or interdimensional. In his book, Messengers of Deception, Vallée states, quote, "Human beings are under the control of a strange force that bends them in absurd ways, forcing them to play a role in a bizarre game of deception." End quote. Later in the same book, he states, quote, "The UFO phenomenon represents a manifestation of a reality that transcends our current understanding of physics. The UFOs are physical manifestations that cannot be understood apart from their psychic and symbolic reality. What we see in effect here is not an alien invasion, it is a control system which acts on humans and uses humans." End quote. J. Allen Hynek, a U.S. astronomer, professor, and ufologist, best remembered for his contributions in the field of UFOs and acting as scientific advisor to UFO studies taken by the U.S. Air Force, again came to same conclusions of the UFOs and alleged extraterrestrial phenomenon. In his book, Edge of Reality, he states, quote, "If UFOs are somebody else's nuts and bolts hardware, then we must still explain how such tangible hardware can change shape before our eyes, vanish in a Cheshire cat manner, not even leaving a grin, seemingly melt away in front of us, or apparently materialize mysteriously before us without apparent detection by persons nearby or in neighboring towns. We must wonder too where UFOs are hiding when not manifesting themselves to human eyes." End quote. The overall consensus seems to be that these crafts which are being seen have the ability to manifest as physical objects and at the same time manipulate time and space as to become invisible or perform aerial maneuvers that defy our current understanding of physics and nature. The deeper side to this phenomenon are the abduction accounts recorded by millions of people all over the world, regardless of time, race, culture, and upbringing. Dr. John Mack, professor at Harvard Medical School, a psychiatrist and writer, also looked into the UFO and abduction phenomenon for several decades and came to similar conclusions as Vallée and Hynek. Although he recently passed away, his contributions to the study of ufology and alien abductions is highly touted and greatly respected. He states in an interview with Nova Online when asked if the phenomenon is literally physical or psychological, stating, quote, "Yes, it's both. It's both literally physically happening to a degree, and it's also some kind of psychological, spiritual experience occurring and originating perhaps in another dimension. And so the phenomenon stretches us, or it asks us to stretch to open to realities that are not simply the literal physical world, but to extend to a possibility that there is other unseen realities from which our consciousness, our, if you will, learning processes over the past several hundred years have closed us off." End quote.
Tell me about that.
Yes, well, I actually remember the first event when I was a kid, waking up in the middle of the night, my sister screaming, terrified. We all go running to her room, and as a kid, Mom never would let me know what had happened that day. Years later, I discovered that that was the first night in which she began experiencing what many people in the secular world call alien abduction. She woke up, small, bulbous-headed, gray, 3 little gray men standing next to her bed, speaking in a gibberish that she couldn't understand, and that when she screamed, they vaporized. They literally just disappeared as if they were more amorphous or shadowy, if you will, made out of smoke. They just disappeared. And that stayed with me once I knew that. Well, here I am, I'm a pastor, right? I'm 25 years a pastor. I pastored large churches. I have responsibilities in the community. Right. Nobody can I talk to about this, you know, in the 70s. And then little by little, information began coming to me that ultimately made me conclude, Sid, that we were talking about a demonic phenomenon.
Why?
Well, first of all, because of the malevolent behavior, but more importantly, and this is really the crux of it, once we learned that by taking the name of Jesus Christ over these powers, we could stop the activity permanently. And from the day that my sister gave her life to the Lord, that activity stopped in its tracks, and that illustrated to this old preacher, we were talking here about demons, not aliens from another world.
But yet we were blinded and deafened at the time we did the recording. Mm-hmm. Nothing registered until this time when God said, go back and look, you already have it. And what he shared was an experience, atypical, abduction type experience, where he had been taken, experienced being taken, and immediately panicked and in fear, and he himself, actually just being a brand new Christian, called out during this panic experience in saying, Jesus, Jesus, help me. And when he did that, in an instant, the experience abruptly stopped. And he felt like he was thrown back into his bed. He even startled his wife. She asked him why he was jumping on the bed. And he said, you know, when he shared that experience, he didn't understand what it meant.
There is another angle to this phenomenon that is seldom discussed, but is very important to point out. That is the solution to help stop those who experience the alien abduction phenomenon. Joe Jordan, state-sanctioned director and field investigator for MUFON, through his investigation at CE4 Research Group, has discovered that calling upon the name of Jesus Christ during the abduction can make the experience stop instantly. On their website, ce4research.com, the mission statement states, quote, "The mission of CE4 Research Group is to share with the world the most powerful evidence known that exposes the alien entities for who they really are. The evidence is in the testimony of those who have overcome the experience, the oppression, the bondage, the harassment, the control, the lies, the deception that these entities perpetuate by calling out in the name and authority of Jesus Christ. Through this evidence of these testimonies, we will be able to help others. The world asks for this evidence, and we will give it to them." End quote. Then, in a later release in a book entitled Transformation, The Breakthrough, he dives deeper into the experience, stating, quote, "Increasingly, I felt as if I were entering a struggle that might even be more than life and death. It might be a struggle for my soul, my essence, or whatever part of me might have reference to the eternal. There are worse things than death, I suspected. So far, the word demon has never been spoken among the scientists and doctors who are working with me. Alone at night, I worried about the legendary cunning of demons. At the very least, I was going stark, raving mad." End quote. Then later in the same book, he states, quote, "I felt an absolutely indescribable sense of menace. It was hell on earth to be there in the presence of these entities. And yet I couldn't move, couldn't cry out, couldn't get away. I lay as still as death, suffering inner agonies. Whatever was there seemed so monstrously ugly, so filthy and dark and sinister. Of course they were demons. They had to be. And they were here, and I couldn't get away."
Let me tell you something. This is information that you must digest in light of the scriptures. But the most important thing is not what we're talking about. The most important thing is that you know God. whether he comes in 1 minute or whether he comes in 20 years. You must know him for yourself. Religion is good if it helps you know God. But if it's an end in itself, it means nothing. The only way you can know God is step one. He's already done everything he's ever going to do for you. His Messiah was sent to earth to die, the Son of the living God, and rise from the dead. And all of your sins and all of your diseases were put upon him. And by his wounds you were healed. Make Jesus your Lord with your mouth. You don't need a formal prayer. You say, Jesus, I make you my Lord. Live inside of me. Forgive me for all of my sins. And this is what the Bible says. You say it's too good. I agree. It is too good. Take the goodness of God. Taste and see that the Lord is good. He's good.
So ultimately, Satan, the fallen cherub, is the culprit behind the work of the New World Order in all of its facets. The entities which directly guide humanity into working for Satan's cause are the fallen angels. Dr. Michael Heiser, an ancient language scholar, has written extensively on the Divine Council. They are the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6, the angels that sinned mentioned in 2 Peter and Jude. They are the lowercase g gods who have had legal authority over various parts of the earth since antiquity. They are also the gods that accepted worship from people in the Old Testament, making them rebels to Yahweh God's kingdom. It is my firm belief that they are the aliens, ascended masters, and other spiritual entities deceiving mankind into creating Satan's kingdom on earth. Whether they manifest with bodies or are simply spiritual beings, I don't know. But the reality is that I don't think anyone would willingly work for Satan if they knew what they were getting themselves into. And thus we live in an age of deceit.
Stephen Hawking is in the news tonight as one of the bona fide smart people on the planet when the renowned astrophysicist warned us about aliens from outer space this weekend. People tended to listen up. On his new Discovery Network series, Stephen Hawking says if aliens visit us here on Earth, quote, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans, end of quote. Make a note, he indicates we should stay away from them at all costs.
5% of all UFO sightings can be immediately identified. It's the 5% that give you the release.
Pilots chase them sometimes, but can't catch them. There are near misses between these things and commercial aircraft.
And he saw the disc hovering.
These are very hard to dismiss, the handful of sightings.
A UFO in broad daylight near Paris.
We suddenly observed a very bright red-orange object. It was oval.
UFOs have interfered with missiles.
I saw something that defied logic.
Um objeto luminoso reported a strange craft, triangular in shape.
On the triangular shaped craft.
Mystery craft being seen.
Dark metallic in appearance.
Flying craft.
There's an orange orb.
Glowing orbs. The glowing orbs. A giant ball of light.
Glowing object.
Could be aliens.
Jesus says that Satan's ultimate goal is he's not only a murderer, and he's been one from the beginning, but he's also a liar and the father of all lies. Not some lies, not just he lies himself. Ultimately, he is the father, the originator of all lies on the planet, right? I didn't say it, Jesus did. Now listen, that means in the context certainly that whatever undermines the truth about Jesus, about his mission here, about what he came to do, about who he is as the Son of God, and that it's only through him and his work on the cross is how we get to heaven. Whatever undermines that and leads people away, that's what Satan's all about. That's what he's talking about here, okay? He is all about lying and deceiving people specifically so they will remain his children, Satan's children, and not be set free by the truth of Jesus Christ. He is the father of all that stuff. Now here's the point, folks, believe it or not, that's precisely what the enemy is doing with the lie of the UFO and alien movement. It's not only clearly demonic in nature, it's a last days lie, just like Jesus said, to steer people away from the truth. The big problem is not what they are, it's who they are. He said the key is to their theology, i.e. what they're teaching. Pay attention to it. That tells you their identity. He said they're all saying the same thing. You come all the way across the universe and you badmouth the Bible. Not some other, quote, religious book out there, but it's all about bad-mouthing the Bible. He says, in other words, it's a supernatural manifestation, which Christianity calls demonic. And I love this point from John Ankerberg. He says, in light of the messages given by UFO entities, how credible is it to think that literally thousands of genuine extraterrestrials would fly millions and billions of light years just to teach New Age philosophy, deny Christianity, and support the occult? Why would they do this with the preponderance of such activity already occurring on this planet? And why would they consistently lie about things which we know are true? And why would they purposely deceive their contacts? Well, I agree, John, and I'll give you the answer. It's because they're demons. That's what demons do. They lie and they propagate false teachings just like their follower Satan.
God doesn't live outside of you. God is you.
While J.Z. Knight is among the more successful mediums, she is certainly not alone. A nearly identical doctrine is preached from a series of channelers who believe they are in communication with extraterrestrial spirits from other planets and galaxies. In the documentary UFOs and Channeling, the late actor Telly Savalas reveals that the purpose of channeling these alien entities is entirely consistent with the purpose of the New Thought, New Age movement, to change the thinking of mankind.
Tonight, we're going to show you some film that may change the way you think about life.
UFO experts are now saying this is secular researchers. They are now saying that these beings are not coming from outer space, far across the universe. They said they're coming from inner space. They're coming from another dimensions, and that just happens to be what the angels and demons do. Interesting. In fact, they say there's no need to entertain this thought that they're coming from outside Earth. Listen to this. This is secular researchers, and this is Flying Saucer Review, folks. This is a secular entity. Gordon Creighton, the editor, he said, quote, there seems to be no evidence yet that any of these craft or beings originate from where? Outer space, okay? Brad Steiger says, we are dealing with a multi-dimensional paraphysical phenomenon which is largely indigenous to where? Planet Earth. And finally, Arthur C. Clarke, he says, one theory that can no longer be taken very seriously is that UFOs are what? Interstellar spaceships, i.e. that they come from outer space. We should not even entertain that idea because that's not what these secular researchers have witnessed over decades of research. We are dealing with a yet unrecognized level of consciousness independent of man, but closely linked to the earth. I do not believe anymore secular research that UFOs are simply the spacecraft of some race of extraterrestrial visitors. This notion is too simplistic to explain their appearance, the frequency of their manifestations through recorded history, and an impressive parallel can be made between UFO occupants and the popular conceptions of what? Demons. That's secular research, folks. And he goes on. He says the medical examination to which abductees are said to have been subjected to, often accompanied by sadistic manipulation, listen, is reminiscent of the medieval tales of encounters with who? Demons. He says, in fact, the symbolic display seen by the abductees is identical to the type of initiations ritual or astral voyage that is embedded in the occult traditions of every culture on the planet. He says, thus, the structure of abduction stories is identical to occult initiation rituals. UFO researcher Lynn Cato said, a large part of the available UFO literature is closely linked with mysticism and the metaphysical, not science. He said it deals with subjects like mental telepathy, automatic writing, and invisible entities, as well as phenomena like poltergeist or ghost manifestations or possession. Shocker. He says many of the UFO reports now being published in the popular press recount alleged incidences that are strikingly similar to demonic possession and psychic phenomena. Secular researcher. Dr. Pierre Guin, he's one of the eminent ones in the French Council of Science Research, says UFO behavior is more akin to what? Magic than it is to physics as we know it. He says the modern UFO knots and the demons of past days are probably what? identical. And one more, John Keel, outside of Jacques Vallée, this guy's probably one of the most informed secular guys on the planet dealing with this topic. And here's what he says. He said, the manifestations and occurrences described in this imposing literature on demonology are similar, if not entirely identical, to the UFO phenomena itself. The UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the age-old demonological phenomena.
My name is Joe Jordan, and I'm the State Section Director for the Mutual UFO Network for Brevard County, Florida. I'm also lead field investigator. When we get a call for an investigation, we take all the information we could over the phone, and then we send investigators out, sometimes myself, sometimes other investigators working with me, and we'd follow up to do an investigation report. To these people, they were sincere, they had sincere experiences, and they were looking, a lot of them looking for help, and they felt that being that we were involved as researchers and investigators, that we could be some help to them.
My name is Joyce Ahrens. I'm a floral designer. I was laying in the bed, my husband and I was laying on my right side. And all I could see when I opened my eyes, all I could see was this red light above the window, and I could see my husband's shoulder, but I was like paralyzed. His skin looked like elephant skin, and he had the big bulbous head with the big wraparound eyes.
As an honest researcher, I realized that I couldn't just count these people out, because the stuff that they had was so bizarre. Most of the researchers in the realm had said it wasn't possible to stop an experience. Knowing that, I called some of the leading researchers in the country. So I said, guys, I've got a very unusual case here. This man, we'll use the name Bill, and during his experience, in fear, he calls out, Jesus, 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 or Jesus, please help me. By calling out, he abruptly stops his abduction experience. These entities can be stopped in the name and authority of Jesus Christ.
Once down in Cocoa, this was after I accepted Jesus Christ, they tried to come. And I kept saying, no, no, you're not doing this. And I took on the empowerment of Jesus Christ, and I stopped that.
For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. These are spiritual entities.
Taking on the empowerment of Jesus Christ puts a stop to a lot of things. And he's helped me a great deal. Thank you, Lord.
Barbara Marciniak, she's a famous New Age author and channeler, okay? And in her book, Bringers of Dawn, she documents what she claims extraterrestrials have told her from the star system Pleiades. And listen to, of all messages, of what they're saying. They say, first of all, there will be great shiftings within humanity on this planet. It will seem that great chaos and turmoil are forming, that nations are rising against each other in war, and that earthquakes are happening more frequently. Earth is shaking itself free. A certain realignment or adjustment period is to be expected. You know, Mother Earth is cleansing herself. It's the same line. The people who what? Leave the planet during the time of earth changes do not fit here any longer, and they are stopping the harmony of the earth. You know, those nasty Christians. Okay? When the time comes that perhaps what? 20 million people leave the planet at one time, there will be a tremendous shift in consciousness for those who are remaining, or dare I say, left behind. That's the tip of the iceberg. Channeler Thelma Terrell, she goes by her spiritual name, Tuella. Okay, she wrote a book called Project World Evacuation. And here's what she shares these entities have told her. Quote, our rescue ships will be able to come in close enough in the twinkling of an eye. Notice how they pepper it with biblical terminology. To set the lifting beams in operation in a moment. and all over the globe where events warrant it, this will be the method of evacuation. Mankind will be levitated, shall we say, by the beams from our smaller ships. These smaller craft will in turn taxi the persons to the larger ships overhead, higher in the atmosphere, where there is ample space and quarters and supplies for millions of people. Don't worry about your loved ones. They'll take care of them. The great evacuation will come upon the world very suddenly. And one more, folks, various UFO channels, the same message they're lying to people. They say the cataclysms are all part of purifying the earth back to its millennium. You know, Mother Earth, again, cleansing herself. Now, they said there will be many visits from the galaxies by interdimensional beings. Yeah, they are. They're spiritual. They're demons. As from the Pleiades, to assist and in some cases rescue people and take them into higher places. Those are the flying machines that you have seen coming into your galaxies that have been preparing themselves for the last 40 years. Some never die on this earth, they say. These missing persons have already been taken, as their time was not up, and they were not meant to go through a demise. They went through a what? Not the rapture of the church. A liftoff from the UFOs. Wow. You got to put yourself in the enemy's shoes. He is a master of deceit. I mean, here you have an event that you cannot deny. Right? It really happened. Millions of people all over the world have suddenly disappeared. You can't put a spin on that one. And to make it even worse, it's only, and specifically only, Christians. And you would think after that event, the normal logical response for those left behind would be something like this. Oh, why didn't I listen to John? Why didn't I listen to my Christian friend or brother or sister or mother or coworker? Why didn't I listen? I've got to get right with God now. And you would think at the shock of the rapture that people in mass would get saved across the planet, right? Not anymore. This is how stinking evil the enemy is in these last days. Don't worry. All it's going to take, the rapture occurs, somebody gets up on the global news network, which we saw already is being built. Don't worry about your loved ones. Yes, they have disappeared. Cat's out of the bag. You guys know that for many decades now, the government has been hiding this truth from you, but UFOs are real. You were right. But we were concerned about you. We had to prepare you for this event, and we want to calm your fears across the globe that, listen, your loved ones, they're okay. It was our UFO space brothers. Your loved ones were not able to go into this new age of utopia that has now finally come across the planet. As you just saw in your news today, the Antichrist himself, you're not supposed to know that. The peace has come for 7 years with Israel. We are now entering a time of peace like never before. Your loved ones are okay. There's ample quarters for them in the smaller UFOs, and we'll take care of them. They'll join us later as we continue to go. And in one fell swoop, that's not just an excuse. That's a brilliant one.
Stephen Hawking, astrophysicist and arguably one of the smartest people on the planet, warned us about the possibility of aliens from outer space.
Hawking says that if extraterrestrials visit us, the outcome might be similar to when Columbus landed in America. In other words, it didn't turn out too well for Native Americans.
Millions of people are going to disappear across the planet. And it will have nothing to do with UFOs. It is Jesus Christ coming back to get his church. And you could be one of them. If you would just cry out today and ask Jesus Christ to forgive you, you will be going.
Many officers of Hitler's staff are on the record saying he was possessed by demons. Hitler himself describes it as divine providence. At the age of 17, he first heard their voices. In his book, Mein Kampf, he describes how a voice saved his life in a battle during World War I. The voice told him to get out of the trench, and seconds after he got out, a shell burst in the very spot, killing all those in the trench. He was now fully convinced he was divinely guided, and began his plan of ruling the world. If this theory is correct, we now know where that plan came from. It's also an explanation of why and how their technology surged ahead of the entire world. Hitler repeatedly escaped death, repeatedly escaped assassination attempts, and repeatedly attributed his miraculous survival to divine providence and the voice, which preserved him so he could fulfill his mandate and his destiny. Hitler's good friend August Kubizek also heard the voice which spoke through his mouth. As Kubizek later explained, it was like Adolf was possessed by a demon. The following is a quote by Gregor Strasser. Listening to Hitler, one suddenly has a vision of one who will lead mankind to glory. A light appears in a dark window. A gentleman with a comic little mustache turns into an archangel. The archangel flies away, and there is Hitler sitting down, bathed in sweat, with glassy eyes. Francis Poncet, ambassador from France to Nazi Germany, said he entered into a sort of mediumistic trance. Hitler was especially afraid of this entity at night. He would come for Hitler while he slept and dreamed.
Vatican Radio, Francis said, if, for example, tomorrow an expedition of Martians came, and some of them came to us, and one says, but I want to be baptized, what would happen? In other words, says The Wire, if God prompts some Martians to come to Earth, find the Pope, and say, we want in on this Catholicism thing, the Pope would probably say, okay, cool, but probably in Latin. The Pope was making the point that baptism shouldn't be denied to anyone, including children of unmarried parents. We're guessing he wasn't totally serious about the aliens part, because after all, he's been known to ditch his prepared speeches in favor of a joke before. After his election, he reportedly turned to his cardinals and deadpanned, may God forgive you for what you have done. He once quipped he was the church's pharmacist whose job it was to prescribe prayer. Joking aside, it's worth noting Pope Francis isn't alone in his compassion toward extraterrestrial life. The Vatican's astronomer said a few years ago he'd baptize a Martian because any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul.
Here are some of the reported flying characteristics of UFOs. While in flight, UFOs will frequently change size, color, or shape. Multiple UFOs will merge into one UFO, and one UFO will instantly change into many UFOs. Many UFO witnesses have described these instant changes to the size and shape of UFOs by saying that the UFOs seemed as if they were alive. UFOs sometimes show up on photographs, but other times they do not. Most witnesses of UFOs do not report seeing an object or craft, but an unusual light moving around the sky. Sometimes UFOs instantly appear and disappear right in front of people, and will also pass right through the ground or physical objects. This type of behavior means that UFOs could not be from the material world, but would have to be some kind of spiritual phenomenon. Based on the observed activity of UFOs, many of the world's top UFO researchers no longer believe that UFOs can be from the material world. Also, most of the so-called UFO abductees can only, quote, remember their, quote, experiences after being put under hypnosis, proving that their so-called experiences with aliens were not real. These issues are covered in much more detail in my book, UFOs, Demonic Activity and Elaborate Hoaxes Meant to Deceive Mankind. If ETs really existed, it wouldn't take them very long to discover what they needed to know about Earthlings. As a consequence, they would have already taken us over, destroyed us, or revealed themselves clearly to humanity. The organization SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has been scanning the skies for decades looking for intelligent life. But they have never picked up even one signal from outer space that would indicate an alien race exists. Those searching for ETs have said that if they did pick up even one complex signal, it would prove that an intelligence must have produced
Everything you know is in your mind.
Online, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot of time.
Well, look, let's begin by finding out whether you're using this line properly or not.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now?
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago, and I've kind of been running across the country. Oh man, I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
So you can't spend a lot of time on the phone. So give us something quick.
Okay. Okay. What we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment, particularly the Area 51. The disasters that are coming, the military, I'm sorry, the government knows about them, and there's a lot of safe areas in this world that they could begin moving the population to now, Art.
But they're not doing anything.
They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out so that the few that are left will be more easily controllable.
Discharge.
I started getting...
The Rhodesian nationalist leader, Bishop Abel Muzorewa, has accepted Mr. Smith's offer to negotiate an internal settlement based on one man, one vote. But, he says, there are conditions. These include stopping the execution of all captured prisoners of war, allowing Giroux to stake in negotiations, being arrested. In Australia, Mr. Kerry Packer's cricketers are still clinging back to yesterday's High Court decision, which stiffed the ban on them playing in Test matches.
This is the voice of Allah, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now to service them as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on other worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening as the planet passes into the new age of Aquarius. The new age will be a time of great peace and evolution for your race. Suddenly, your rulers are made aware of many forces that cannot shadow their judgments. Be still now, and listen, or your chance may not come again. All your weapons of evil must be removed. The time for conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the higher stages of its evolution, if you show yourselves worthy to do this. You have but a short time to learn to live together in peace and goodwill. Small groups all over the planet are learning this, and exist to pass on the light of the dawning new age to you all. You are free to accept the kitchen teachings of those who learn to live.
Many go as wide as this. Then they run out.
Spiritual evolution. Here now, the voice of Rilon, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. Be aware also that there are many false prophets and guides at present operating on your planet. They will suck your energy from you, the energy you call money, and will put it to evil ends, giving you worthless costs in return. But your divine self will protect you from this. You must be utterly sensitive to the voice within that can tell you what is true and what is learn to listen to the voice of truth.
It's such a
Read yourself. This is our message.
I really appreciate that we can't do it. I insist on delicious, full of only really choice ingredients. I can cats have 9 lives.
Have no fear. Keep on knowing yourself and discover the ways of your planet Earth. The Ashtar Galactic Command thanks you for your attention. Beyond the fleeting days of your existence, may you be blessed by the supreme love and truth of words.
Use your imagination.
Can you state your name for the camera?
Dr. Abigail Tyler.
Okay, where would you like to begin?
I am actress Mila Jovovich, and I will be portraying Dr. Abigail Tyler. This film is a dramatization of events that occurred October 2000. Every scene in this movie is supported by archived footage. Some of what you're about to see is extremely disturbing.
I wake up in the middle of the night almost every night.
And there's nothing unusual waking you up?
There's one thing. There's an owl at my window.
An owl?
His eyes are big.
A white owl, just looking at me. Had you ever seen it before?
Tommy?
When I was a kid, just staring at me.
I've seen it a lot.
Every night this week.
4, 3, 2. Tell me about the owl.
Tell me about the owl.
It doesn't look like a normal owl.
There's no owl. It's not an owl.
That voice is speaking Sumerian, the oldest language in human history. You can go into any Sumerian exhibit and see etchings and sculptures of men in spacesuits and oxygen masks. Rockets that look like Apollo.
Do you believe in abduction theories?
You don't mean alien abductions, do you?
There was more fear in his eyes than I've ever seen in my life.
What's wrong?
There are more missing people in Nome than any other town in Alaska.
I have to get this out of my head because it's dug in there and I can't think straight.
Scott.
We gotta send backup now.
What'd you see? You were there.
I can't explain it.
Someone or something came into my room. And it took me away.